I'm Jody.
And I'm Kat.
And you're listening to Felons and Families.
Jody and Kat are not lawyers, nor are they therapists. The following conversations are based on work and life experiences. The information and advice provided are opinions only and should not replace the advice that can be obtained from a lawyer or licensed therapist.
Kat, we had just recorded this episode and I didn't actually push the record button.
It's okay. Second time's the charm.
Second time's the charm. So if we sound tired or even rehearsed, that's because I didn't push the record button. So welcome back to Felons and Families, the podcast where we discuss topics regarding felons and their families that find themselves in the criminal justice system. If you're just now tuning in and you have no idea who we are or why we have anything to say, you can go back to our introductory podcast. That's where we go into who we are and our experience and that sort of thing. But today's topic is about public or federal defenders, panel attorneys, hired attorneys. For this episode, we're going to just refer to public defenders, but in the federal system, they're called federal defenders. And panel attorneys, they are appointed attorneys by the court, but they also work as hired attorneys. So they do some work as a federal defender, but they don't work for the federal defender's office.
Oh, okay.
And that's what panel attorneys are. For a deeper dive, if you want a better understanding on the roles, how they're appointed, that sort of thing, then I want to give a shout out to a podcast called The Prosecutor's Legal Brief. They don't know that we exist, but I know that they exist. And they did a really good job defining the differences of the federal defenders, public defenders, in their episode called Our Love Letter to Public Defenders. So you can always check that out.
Excellent.
Today, though, we just want to talk about the myth. I believe it's a myth. There's this negative attitude. I'm a big true crime podcast listener, and it seems to be a general consensus, quite frankly, that public defenders are overworked. They have large caseloads. They're not going to fight for you. They don't really care. That they come from low-grade colleges, and that you'd have a better defense if you hire an attorney.
Yeah, my understanding, coming from the general public side that happen to be poorer and need mostly of public defenders, is that public defenders don't care, that they are overworked and underpaid, that they may be in cahoots with a judge, or downright look down on upon their peers.
Upon their peers.
Yeah, their peers might look down upon them because they're just public defenders.
Oh, so as though they're low level.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of like when I was working juvenile hall, generally you wanted to move up from there. You wanted to become a probation officer.
Yeah. So I was discussing with my friend today about what we were going to talk about. And she had pointed out that we both thought that public defenders had to start off as public defenders before they could be appointed to a prosecutor.
Oh, okay. So
like a stepping stone, like community service for public defenders.
Okay. Wow. It's probably stemming from the idea that, well, why would anyone choose to be a public defender? Because nobody would want to actually, for the most part, fight vigorously or defend a person who's committed a crime, especially the heinous crimes like murder or child molestation, that sort of thing. So the assumption you're thinking is that, well, they must not want to, so they have to. They have no choice because they don't come in with the high enough education or from the better schools.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was thinking about it. And not just myself, my best friend. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's not true.
It's not true.
That's not true.
Okay, that's not community service or,
No.
The stepping stone to become a larger, or not, I guess they're equal.
They're equal. They get paid the same.
Wow.
I mean, based on their level of education, based on their number of years of experience, that sort of thing. But they're not lower level. They get paid on a similar pay bracket.
That's so funny.
So prosecutors walking in, let's say a brand new prosecutor with the same sort of resume, the same sort of background and experience and education, and same with defense attorney. They're both at the same level. They're getting paid the same. Public defenders aren't sitting on the other side of the aisle wanting to be or wish they could get paid like their prosecutor.
That's funny. I always judge them by the clothes that they wear too.
That is, well, in the movies, they definitely They definitely make it look like the public
That's
defenders
funny.
are making
Lower. Yeah.
So little. I don't think that that's true. In fact, at least on the federal level, they dress the same. I saw a little bit more flair in the dress from public defenders, but I think that might come from, and this is just right now off the cuff opinion, I kind of got the feeling that it just they have a different personality. Public defenders, the way I understand it, and the prosecutors in legal briefs, they go over it as well, that public defenders are deeply rooted in the right, our constitutional right to have a vigorous defense. And they really believe in that. And they believe in it so heartily that's why they chose to go into this line of work.
Yeah, my neighbor, actually, he's a retired public defender. I'm like, wow, what was that like? You know, thinking he was going to tell me horror stories, but he says it was the best career choice he could have ever made, that he loved helping people.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the dress thing, because, like I said, I could think back to some public defenders, and they did have a flair about them. But I think it made them relatable to the public. I think maybe that's where that comes from.
How funny.
Makes them a little more relatable.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you bring that up. The show Shameless, the series Shameless, have you ever seen Shameless?
I watched an episode or two, but haven't got a chance to sit down and fully watch it.
There's a series called Shameless. It's not for the weak of heart. Show kind of took me a while to get into it, but I am watching it the second time around. And there's this part where there's character Lip. He gets arrested. He's like a 17-year-old kid, gets arrested. And his sister, she gets asked by her friend Veronica, what are you going to do about an attorney? She says, well, they're going to appoint him a public defender. And Veronica says, no, you don't want to go with a public defender. They come from low-grade schools. They're brand new. They have no experience. We got to find ourselves a hired attorney. So my point is that this idea that public defenders aren't good is hitting mainstream main series. And it just seems so unfair.
I think it's kind of tied to poverty too.
Okay.
Somebody that can afford, you think you're going to get a better attorney, more bang for your buck,
right,
with a hired attorney. It's like Medi-Cal versus Kaiser, or Blue Shield, Blue Cross. You're not going to get as good a care with Medi-Cal as you are with the PPO.
It's what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's the mind of the general people, I think.
Do you have any experience with public defenders?
Yes, I do. One instance that I felt jaded was I was living in a rehab facility, and I needed to clear up any court cases, any open charges that I had in order to stay in rehab.
Okay.
I had 2 DUIs that were open and hadn't been sentenced on or convicted on, and I got to the courthouse and spoke briefly with the public defender and told him, hey, I'm in rehab and I'm doing this, that, and the other to better my life. And I thought maybe he would fight for me a little bit to get some of the some of the requirements lowered. Because, there's going to be a set standard for the minimum, not extra. But he looked at me and he's like, well, this judge is very hard on DUIs and he's going to throw the book at you.
Okay.
And while we were in court, I didn't feel like he had my back at all.
Okay. So you left there thinking that he didn't care for all the reasons we just talked about.
Yes.
That you were deserving of a more vigorous defense.
Yes.
Okay. So I heard that all the time as an officer, heard that all the time. And I just want to challenge you that back in our prior episodes, we talked about knowing your judge. You remember? And I mentioned having a judge that no matter what, just did not matter. No matter what, you were going to get a year on the violation side of that DUI state case. Okay. It just didn't matter what we did. And so I remember this one case, I wrote like a 3-page letter on behalf of this defendant of all the good things that this defendant had been doing, because I didn't believe he was deserving of a year. It was his first time DUI. And it didn't matter what I wrote. It didn't matter all the good stuff that he had been doing. This kid got a year. So when you think about that, when you know that, I could have saved my work. I could have just not done the 3-page letter. Why do the work if I know that that's what this judge is going to do? And so in your case, without knowing the full details of your case, it kind of sounds like that could be what it is, that your attorney, there's found nothing about your case that would mitigate what the judge was going to do enough. He knows exactly what 5 things he's got to look for that would maybe get this judge's attention, and your case didn't have it.
See, I had no idea going into it. I just felt abandoned.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how the system can feel, but it doesn't mean that the public defender was abandoning you. It felt cold. Sure.
Yeah.
Could that a public defender have explained it to you better? Possibly. But it doesn't mean that there was anything about your case that a hired attorney would do. Now, maybe the hired attorney, not knowing the judge, would have gone in and tried to defend your case more vigorously. Maybe. But that could also piss off the judge.
Yeah.
There's just a reality in things that go on in the courthouse that unless you do the job, it's hard when you're the person that it's happening to, it's going to be hard to accept that and hear that. And to exemplify that, just before I left, I was helping an officer on a case, and I was brought in because I was considered more like the financial expert. It was a financial case, and the girl just wasn't making her payments. And there was more money that we found that she had access to. At any rate, she originally had a public defender. Now, as an officer, I've helped this officer collect. I'm just going to use but I've collected all of these documents, right, and proof. And I know that I have a mountain of proof that I'm prepared to show to the court. When I look at that, oftentimes I'll ask myself, well, what is defense going to do? Before we even send the letter to the court, we're looking to see what is defense going to pick apart on here. Because I want to try to mitigate that defense. And so is there anything else I need to do? Anything else I need to collect to mitigate the defense having an argument? Well, I knew that this case was strong. This girl had such an attitude towards the whole thing, such an attitude, believing that she wasn't doing anything wrong. It didn't even get her attention that I was brought in on the case. Nothing was catching, officer. Yeah, nothing was catching this girl's attention that she might be getting herself into trouble, painting herself into a corner. I know that if I was her attorney, I would say, listen, the last thing you want to put this judge through, because this particular judge doesn't take financial cases lightly. You're not making your payment, you have access to extra money, you're likely to see some custody time, especially if you maintain that attitude. And I would have, if I was her attorney, say, listen, we are better off admitting these allegations and get to sentencing, and I can argue points on your behalf because of your youth, because of your ignorance to the process. You get it now. You're awake. You're willing to cooperate. I can argue on sentencing to get a lower sentence for you, or maybe no sentence. But if we put this judge through evidentiary and force that judge to read all this stuff and all this evidence, you could be looking at some real time. I think that's what happened. I don't know for sure. I wasn't there, but I saw it time and time again as an officer, that I think because of, again, she had the attitude. She didn't listen to her public defender. She felt similarly to you, that when she was told this wall of facts, and it sounded like public defender doesn't want to work with you, doesn't want to work for you, doesn't want to provide a vigorous defense for you. But the reality is that public defender was giving her the best advice ever.
Wow. So
next thing I know, she gets a hired attorney. And when this hired attorney walked in, I knew immediately that she'd never worked federal before.
Oh, no.
I knew it by her dress. Federal court's very serious. It's very professional. And you want to look very sort of sophisticated in a way. She had like a hat on. She had weird, funky clothes, funky colors. I instantly knew she has not worked federal, nor had I ever heard of her.
Wow.
I also could tell because she didn't understand the procedures of the court. She wasn't having her client sit at the table. She didn't know to stand to speak to the judge. She didn't even know she was supposed to walk over to the podium. The prosecutor was trying to help her. You need to go over to the podium to talk. She clearly didn't understand the procedures. The judge was having to correct her.
Oh my gosh.
The judge was getting angry with the attorney. And the last thing you want is for your judge to be getting angry at your attorney. She didn't do well. It didn't go well for her. And so I wonder, did that money you spent on this attorney serve you? It didn't serve her.
Yeah, I had an experience where I actually retained services of a paid attorney.
Okay.
When my CPS case first started, I wanted to have the best attorney that I could afford.
Right.
So I went to the phone book, which is this book that used to contain all the numbers.
Back in the day.
Yeah. And
today it would be the first Google page?
Yes,
okay.
yes. So, the best that I could afford, the best money could buy.
Right.
And I met with him, gave him $3,000 retainer, asked him if he had worked with CPS court before. He assured me he had, which was really important to me because
Sure.
in our county, you're not allowed to go into the court. So you really rely on your attorney to speak for you.
Wow.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to talk about that later.
Okay.
And it became apparent after a couple weeks that he had never worked in a CPS case. And I had to ask him to excuse himself from our case, and he took the $3,000 and ran.
Took the $3,000.
And I got my kids back with the public defender.
Right. So, okay, obviously then one note to make is make sure if you're going to hire an attorney that you make sure that that attorney has worked in whatever jurisdiction your case is in, has true experience,
Yes.
maybe confirm that experience because he told you yes,
Yes.
but you didn't confirm it. Probably didn't know how to confirm it.
How would you confirm it?
I don't know. We're going to look into that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we didn't prepare that sort of research for this episode, but I think
Yeah.
we will now look into that and
Yeah.
on another episode or put it in our notes in our website. At any rate, okay, what about this myth about their caseloads are too high? That's the reason why public defenders seem to not be pushing your case to trial and trying to ensure that you get trial, that they're almost avoiding trial because their caseloads are too high. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we feel like we have enough access to them. They're just not available. Maybe
Okay.
it's a time thing. Sometimes you only meet with them at the courthouse.
That is true. Actually, that's a really, really good point. I would see the frustration with my defendants. Again, more facing violations. That's what I dealt with the most. And you are right. Now, some public defenders are really good about that. They would call the defendant a week prior to a hearing. But to your point, oftentimes, if it's a citation, you would have maybe a month's notice that you're going to court. And there is more control and maybe a feeling of calmness that you can call, hire an attorney, and get advice right away.
Mm-hmm.
That is a pro to hiring an attorney for sure. A public defender, you are going to have to oftentimes wait for your initial appearance.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's when you're going to talk to that attorney because that attorney got appointed that day.
Yeah.
Or within just a matter of days prior. So that's a con on using a public defender. But that also is not because they have high caseloads. It's just because it's part of the system. And an obvious pro to hiring an attorney is because you're calling a receptionist and they're setting up an appointment, that sort of thing. But that doesn't have anything to do with a public defender being busy. In fact, what I would see is very similar to my father. My father is not a criminal attorney. He's a trial attorney. But growing up, I would see how his life would change and evolve only around that trial because he was in trial. I would always hear my mom say, "We need to be quiet. Your father's in trial. Your father won't be making it to your whatever event because your dad's in trial." And I saw the same sort of behaviors by both prosecutors and public defenders. If I had a subsequent case that was way smaller, not trial type, and I needed to get a hold of them, I may not hear from them for 3 days. Eventually, they'd call me, usually after hours, saying, "Sorry, I've been in trial." I would see them, public defenders, talk in court as we're trying to come up with a calendar date. I've got trial. It was very clear, like how I grew up, that suddenly their calendar is closed to all other things and they're focused only on trial. Well, if you're the person that's going to trial with your public defender, that's what you want.
Wow.
So I really think that that's a myth as well.
Yeah, I never knew that either.
I really think that's a myth. The only other thing I want to kind of bring up is, and I don't know how to regulate it. I don't know how to prove it, but I think that one thing that would give me pause if I was going to hire an attorney is just remembering, and I'm not saying that all hired attorneys would do this. Of course, you want to believe that every hired attorney out there would never do what I'm about to suggest. But we also know that there's bad officers, there's bad judges, there's bad baristas at Starbucks. Trust me, because I'm trying to figure out what day not to go. And it's that the mere fact that you're paying this attorney, right? You almost question, well, are you saying that we should go to trial because you want me to give you $10,000? Like, should we go to trial? I really want to know that. If I had the option, if it was possible, because I don't really understand how it all works on how the courts decide whether or not you can afford an attorney or not. But it doesn't seem to matter really, because I see that girl's story. She had a public defender. Next thing I know, she's got a hired attorney because your mom can hire the attorney, your dad can hire the attorney, however that works. But if I'd almost want to hear from a public defender first and what their opinion is about my case? Are they trying to tell me I should just take a plea bargain, that I should just admit these allegations, and here's the reasons why, and I know this judge and what you're looking at? And then, while that's my attorney for now, then on the side, go talk to a hired attorney that's worked in that system and see what they say. And does it make sense? Take somebody with you that it's not happening to.
Yeah.
Somebody really third party that's maybe not going to cry when you go away. Like somebody that's just pragmatic, just somebody with you. And listen to the answer of the hired attorney. If the hired attorney is closely matching, but they found one reason why they think trial might be a good idea, and it sounds good enough to you, then maybe you spend that money. But if it sounds like they're about the same place as far as what your case has, maybe just stick with the public defender.
It's like my ex, who is a felon. He used to always tell me, you know, if you ever get arrested for anything, push it out for trial, make them work for it. Well, I guess if you have a public defender, you could do that. If you have a paid attorney, you can only do that if you've got the funds for it.
If you've got the funds for it, I would see that, though. I would see that that's a very unpleasant tactic for everyone else. But yeah, what they would do, I've seen it done too for two reasons. One strategy, or maybe both. One strategy, and the other is because the defendant was so difficult and he was getting the same advice from each attorney. Again, you're screwed. They've got a lot on you. You're better just to admit. Yeah. And we'll deal with sentencing. And he's hearing that from all the different attorneys. So every time there was a new change in attorney, we'd show up in court, and the new attorney, which of course got hired 2 days before the hearing, says, Your Honor, this is a mountain of paperwork. I need more time. And so it just kept kicking the can.
Yeah. I don't know if it's good advice, but that's what he told me.
Yeah. It definitely kicks the can down. I think maybe as a strategy, it's good advice. If you probably know you're going to go to jail and you're trying to get to your daughter's birthday, or you're trying to make it through Christmas or something like that, but you run the risk of pissing off the judge. And you haven't gotten to sentencing yet.
I think it's a pretty good risk of pissing off the judge. And then that goes back to our episode about personality.
Personality, yeah. Well, Kat, is there anything else you want to share?
I just want to say, you know, whether you get a public defender or a paid attorney, make sure you guys are on the same page and work for what's in your best interest.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers this topic. Next week, we'll be discussing issues involving substance abuse, use, and drug testing, and what you need to know. Well, we have lots to discuss, but we want to hear from you as well. If you have a story that you would like to share, or a topic you would like to hear us cover, please email us at F as in Frank, A as in Apple, F as in Frank at felonsandfamilies.com. FAF@felonsandfamilies.com. If you like us, help us out by subscribing. You can hear us on all the ways that you can get a podcast, or you can go to our website, felonsandfamilies.com. I'm Jody.
And I'm Kat.
And you're listening to Felons and Families.